All right, welcome back to another episode of Dr. J Radio Live. Of course, I'm your host, Dr. J, broadcasting from the city of Angels. Now, we have a very special guest today. He is a alien hunter, an investigator, and also investigates implants, and I'll let him tell you about his own implants when we get there. So without further ado, the one and only Mr. Derrel Sims. Derrel, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. Glad to be here tonight.
Now, how did you get started in hunting aliens?
That's a real good question. I was actually a captive audience. I was an abductee from the age 4 years old, and I had no idea back then. That was 1952. I had no idea, nor did anyone else that I knew had any idea that aliens or anything like that existed. At 4 years old, you don't know much of anything.
52, wasn't that the year that the Capitol building in DC had a flyover twice in a week of discs?
That is absolutely correct. Your memory serves you well. The fact is that several of my abductees were involved in that directly and indirectly. 1952, later, after I became an alien hunter, I met a number of people, and one of my abductees was part of an anti-aircraft battery that was stationed. There were three of them stationed around the Capitol building. They actually thought we were under attack from an alien world during that 1952 event where the UFOs came over the Capitol building. The second thing was I later met a pilot who flew up against the UFOs, and that was fascinating.
Now, this reminds me of Reagan's speech twice, where he said that if we were all faced with an alien threat, wouldn't we all get together? And by saying that, it seems either he knew of an alien threat or he was just making a hypothetical. What's your opinion on that?
My opinion is that he knew that there was an alien threat, and as any reasonable president that's got his head screwed on knows, the reason Trump has set up a space force in outer space isn't because we're afraid of satellites. They've been here for a long time. There are other reasons, in my opinion. I don't know what the full impact of that is. I know the stories that are out on the internet and everything else, and I've spent 2 years in the intelligence community in the CIA myself, and 3 years as a volunteer during the military during the Vietnam War. So I do have some degree of understanding of that level of information because I do have top secret clearance.
Now, you actually read my mind. I was going to ask you if the Space Force is because it's going to be a full-on disclosure.
The Space Force, I don't know a great deal about it, and the little that I do know, some of that is classified. This is awful to have to say that, so I can't discuss that, but I can tell you that it's real, and that it's not about the Chinese and the Russians and so on. It's far more than that.
I only wish that the Space Force was started 40 years ago, because as a child I would have done my darndest to become a soldier in the Space Force. But I fear that because of all the drones, including space drones, we're not going to have many astronauts as we are going to have space drones. What do you take on? What's your take on that?
Well, ultimately, the first and the last entities, literally in a war that occur, is first of all the your soldier. They're going to be there on the ground in some capacity, either spying or searching out. And the last ones that'll be on the ground will still be the ground soldier with the rifleman, basically. Those will be there regardless. That never changes. All the other things in between those two, everything in the world can happen for sure. No question about it.
Now, you said you were abducted at age 4. Based on what I've learned over the 6, 7, 800 interviews I've done, working with Yvonne Smith and other people, I was a spokesperson for Zero. I do believe, and their evidence is shown, that the abductees follow in family lines. So chances are that your parents or grandparents were abductees and so on and so forth. Have you ever talked to your family about this? Your parents and grandparents?
I have, as a matter of fact, we in the 1980s we put together some statistics about abductees, and a lot of people actually have hopscotched off of those over the years and to come up with their own as well. But the bottom line is that one of the first things we figured out back in the 1980s was that the alien phenomena does follow a family lineage.
Mm-hmm.
It sometimes picks. Generally, you may not find it's everybody in your family or anything like that. That's very rare. Generally, you'll find if you'll contact grandma, grandpa, or other people in the family privately, you'll find that they'll tell you some very similar experiences to your own if you're an abductee or a contactee.
How many times do you recall being abducted?
I remember about 10 events over a period of 13 years, and my events started, like I said, in 1952 at age 4, and ended violently at age 17. And
Violently? Ooh, can you
the last
that?
event was pretty horrific.
Was it because of the fear you had, or were you resisting, or?
No, I've never discussed my final event with anyone other than through a metaphor, because most of the information contained in that last event, I've been looking for people who have this same experience or something similar, and I've found 8 people so far in all these years, 8 people that have had a similar event with one of the 5 different entities were involved in my last event, and the 5 entities do not show up in any UFO literature, none. So the 8 people that I've found so far that I've had a similar experience to some of the aspect I did at age 17. Those 8 people had met only one of the 5 entities that I had encountered that night.
Can you talk
But in their event, it was quite horrific.
Can you talk about the 5 different entities that were involved in your event? Because most people have the typical 3 to 4 foot almond eyes grays.
The only thing I've ever discussed about them was that they were different, and a lot of times I'll get people at UFO meetings and so on. They'll say, "Oh yeah, me too," and I'll say, "Okay, describe them." And of course, there they are with their tongue hanging out of their mouth. Oh, there were white robes, and there was a big long table, and they were from the Galactic Council. I said, wrong. So nice try. So I've never described any of the entities to anyone. The 8 people that I have met have described the one correctly. And again, they're not in the UFO literature. You will not find them anywhere. The best way to think about it is the alien is, in my opinion, there's 7 flavors. I call them models of the alien. One is the small gray, which is the one that got me when I was quite small. He usually picks you up or delivers you, or brings you back. I call him the cosmic pizza delivery man because he comes after us. We're the pizza. And then there's the second one, which is The little one's only, he's got an IQ about 100, maybe, no, it's not even true. He's got an IQ about 80, 85 maybe. He's not very smart. He can't even get your clothes on right half the time. And then the second one is one that looks just like him, but he's taller, a little bigger, and he's a lot smarter. If there's going to be an implantation or something, he's the one that's going to do it. And then there's a praying mantis, there's a Bigfoot, and it's like I said, there's 7 of them total. All those are part and parcel to the alien phenomena that I refer to as the models. They are not races from other planets. They're simply models, constructed, made, hatched, or cloned for the purpose of interaction with mankind.
I'm glad you brought up Bigfoot as an ET because, first of all, John Lear, every time he comes on here, he says that Bigfoot is not from here. He's an ET, and a good supporting evidence about this is why have we never come across a carcass?
Well, again, my thesis, to answer that, it still falls within the purview of my operating thesis, which is that these beings are made, hatched, cloned, and manufactured for the purpose of interaction with mankind. And one of the Bigfoot cases that I worked on with another individual from Louisiana was out in Odessa, Texas. Now, for those of you who don't know anything about Odessa, in the summer it's about 115 degrees out there. It was so hot my phone stopped just from the heat. And for a Bigfoot to be out there in the desert makes absolutely zero sense to me. But the fact is, we have a film of him, and there's no question. And you say, well, it's just it's an 8-foot tall guy in a suit. Well, that may be true. It'd be an awful tall guy. He's a lot bigger than the basketball players I know about. And the problem with that thesis is that if you're out there in any kind of a coat or anything like that, 114 degree weather in Odessa, you'll be dead in about 15 minutes.
Well, unfortunately, here in California, last summer, not 2019, but 2018, here in Los Angeles, San Fernando Valley, we had 117 degrees Fahrenheit days, and fortunately, we don't have humidity. We have dry heat, but still, it's one of those things where you take a shower and then you get out and you sweat just as much as you had showered. So, Odessa, I'm gonna mark that on a map and say I'm not gonna go there anytime in the spring or summer.
For sure. The thing is that the thing I questioned about the Bigfoot being out there is how did he get out there? He obviously didn't walk across the United States to get there, across the desert. So in my opinion, just like the alien, they're brought here by someone else and are placed in our activities, such as abduction as an example, and for whatever purposes that they've designed them for. And Bigfoot is simply part of that program.
I've also heard that Bigfoot is telepathic. What do you say about that?
Well, no more than any of the other alien phenomena. When I was 4 years old, when I made a mistake apparently, and I woke up. I woke up is not the right term. I was switched on. I somehow just switched on and realized something's in my room, and I realized whatever he is, he's skinny, big bulbous head that was pure white, and he was walking toward the wall, and I thought he was going to bump into the wall. And I thought to myself, he's going to bump into the wall, and apparently he heard me think, because he turned around instantly and realized that I was conscious, and I heard something for the first time in my life I had never, ever heard in my head, and that was a voice that wasn't mine speaking and said, "It's awake." And I realized the only it in there was me, because he wasn't talking to himself.
Yeah.
So they have we use the word psychic ability for talking like that from head to head, that sort of thing. I don't see that the Bigfoot is any different than any of the other models. They have very varying degrees of abilities.
There's a question for you, but before I ask it, let me just tell everyone in the chat, please, if you have questions, write them in caps so I can see that they are questions and not comments. Okay, here's your question. King James, ask Mr. Simmons about PLFs. Mr. Sims, not it's misspelled. Ask Mr. Sims about PLFs. What do you know about that?
What's PLS? Give me a clue here.
I don't know. Hopefully, King James, you can tell us what the acronym or what PLF stands for.
Yeah, I know many acronyms, and I'm trying to figure out which one this one is.
Well, in skydiving, PLF is parachute landing fall, but that's different. We're not talking about skydiving. We're talking about ETs.
For sure.
So now, at age 4, you were taken. How many times from then until now have you been taken?
My event stopped violently at age 17. I've never had an event since then. But my son was taken after me.
Familial lines again. Now, is your son still being taken?
Not that I know of. He's about 40 years old now, but he had been for up to about 7 or 8 years ago. They were still contact.
Now, it's reasonable to think that when you were being taken and as your son was being taken, that ETs are trying to create hybrids by taking sperm from men over from women, and whatever they do modification wise, and then they create and also they put these in incubators, and all of a sudden several months later they have themselves a either human looking ET or a human and alien ET. And I believe that each generation of these hybrids that are mixed with more human sperm and ova, that I would think that there's a time in where they will look just like us, except they will have ET abilities. Do you think that time has come yet?
Well, I'm an ex-cop and a private investigator in the state of Texas and a process server. And so for me, evidence is everything. Theory is anybody can think of anything. But the bottom line is, in my line of business, even in the UFO work that I do, evidence is everything to me. In other words, I can sit here and tell everybody implants exist, and people can say, yes, it does, or no, it doesn't. But if I don't have any evidence, it's just another story. It doesn't mean anything. So the same thing for me in the so-called hybrid situation. And I'll throw this out to your audience and see if they agree or like it or find it useful. MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, years ago, some of their doctors got together and started saying that, as I understand it, that women that were having these so-called alien pregnancies were in fact not real, and that they were either spontaneous abortions, or they were absorptions. The fetus got absorbed, and that's why they disappeared. Or in other words, it wasn't alien related. And I thought that was a pretty bad thing to say, because most women know their bodies pretty well, and they kind of know when they're pregnant and when they're not. Yes. And long story short, I did a presentation on implants just for a group of MUFON investigators up in Minnesota. And in the last part of the presentation, they were all sitting there with their mouths open, shocked looking at this stuff. And I said, the worst implant that I have ever seen, I want to show you, and it's going to sting quite a bit. And they're all wondering, well, what's he going to show now? And then I showed a sonogram of an alien fetus inside a woman.
Wow.
Needless to say, after they had already made the announcement that these women didn't know what they were talking about, that there aren't any of these alien fetuses roaming around here or anything like that, they were sitting there shocked whenever I showed them the sonograms. And then also that they had been reviewed by one of the top fetal hospitals in London as one of my cases. And they didn't know what in the world the thing was with the large bulbous head, the long pointed chin.
King James here followed on with what we were asking to just to say what PLF is. It's programmed life forms, aka models. What do you know about them?
Well, programmed life models, to me, it represents the alien phenomena. In my view, the alien phenomena, these are, as I said before, they're beings that are made, hatched, cloned, or manufactured for the purpose of interaction with mankind. How I first discovered that was when I was age 4, and the alien turned around and looked at me, and there was a small amount of light in my room. I could see him very well, and he was pure white. He wasn't brown or tan or anything like that. He wasn't gray as well. He was pure white, and he had perfectly round black eyes, not the Hollywood version, but literally, yeah. This was the original models had round eyes. In fact, if you look at petroglyphs, you'll see they have round eyes as well when you see the alien in petroglyphs. But anyway, when he turned around and looked at me, and I looked at him, I realized he didn't have any clothes on. It's wintertime. It's cold. I'm freezing even in my little room, and he hasn't got any clothes on. I can't figure this out. Of course, as a little kid, kids look at everything. It's what they do. And I noticed right off the bat that he didn't have any genitalia. He didn't have what I refer to then as a TT. He didn't have a TT, and ET didn't have a TT. So the second thing I noticed is he didn't have a belly button. Well, years later, I figured out that if you don't have a belly button, you weren't born.
You were hatched, manufactured.
Made or manufactured.
Yeah.
You got here some other way.
It's almost like these come off a factory line. Same, each one.
I call them the cosmic toasters.
I like that.
They're even if you put 1 million of them in a room and you put my little guy in the room with them, and they're all the same height, I could pick him out of all of them. I don't know why I can do that, but I could, because they all look the same, but they have a bit of a different signature in some sense of the word. And I actually know, I call him my handler because that's what he basically is. He picks you up and delivers you to the event.
Now, up until Roger Lear died, he had 17 surgeries to remove the implants. I was present at surgery number 17, and he told me that you also possess at least one, if not more, of these implants. What do you say about that?
Oh, one or more. That's funny. I have conducted 25 surgical interventions for the alien implant worldwide. Last case was in India. I have a large collection. I have the biggest collection of implants and physical objects, even from UFOs. It's there. In fact, I'm in 3 museums: one in Japan, one in Košice, Slovakia, and in Roswell. I have been in Roswell for over 20 years. No, Roger was I was his mentor.
Yes, that's what he said. You guys were partners.
I brought the phenomena to him because I wanted him to help me with the foot surgery, and that's how he got started.
I have to give a shout out for a super chat from the one and only Justin T. Justin T, thank you and the Blue Crew. Thank you for your support. Now, the implants do they all look the same?
No, they do not.
So, is this implying that there are different species that are using these implants, or they just
In my
evolved?
opinion, they're not. They're the entities, the seven entities that we're seeing. In my opinion, are not species at all. They're made, manufactured, hatched, or cloned entities for the purpose of interaction with us. One of the interactions is implantation. And I really want to underline this for your audience because I hate it when people scare people uh, by telling everybody, oh, you've got alien implants. Alien implants are extremely rare, extremely so. And I swear I get at least 10 emails a month that all saying that, I've got implants everywhere. I've got, no, you really don't. I ask, give me the medical evidence that these implants are there. Oh, well, they're just there. I don't have to have evidence. Yes, you do. You actually do. Well, when you get a doctor to remove those, nobody's going to do anything to you in any sense of the word without medical evidence that, in fact, you have foreign objects in you. And even then, the foreign objects may not be alien implants.
That's right. It could be a
But
piece of glass or something
it
like
could be
that.
anything. And believe me, there have one time when Roger and I were working together, he told one of our abductees that she had an object in her foot, and he said that's a crystalline implant. And she called me up and said, "What do you think?" And I said, she said, "Just tell me the truth." And I said, "You walk around the house barefooted?" She said, "Yes." And I said, "You had any broken glass lately?" And she said, "Actually, we dropped a mason jar."
Ooh,
And you
ouch.
think it could be what it is? And I said, "It's not a crystalline implant, I can tell you." I sent it off to the laboratory, and they sent it back, and they looked at it for a long time. They broke a mason jar of all things and found the exact shard just like that, and said that's exactly what we think it is. Well, they were exactly right. It's not a crystalline implant. It's called a shard of glass.
Now,
Implants are quite different.
two things I want to ask you about implants. What do you think their purpose is? Because 35 years ago, when I heard about implants, or 30 years ago, I thought they were just for tracking us. But now we're able to be tracked by so much technology here on Earth. I mean, if you recall recently that General Soleimani from Iran, the number two in charge, they tracked him and they fired on him because of his cell phone, because of the signal it was sending out. So I started
Sure.
to think that maybe the implants do more, such as put thoughts in your head, maybe control you, or even send back all sorts of data. What do you think they are?
Well, it depends on where they're located and for what reason they were placed in there. Where they're located gives us a hint. The type of entity that put it in there helps identify even more. But in a nutshell, it's really easier to say what the implants are not rather than what they are. Um, for instance, they're not a transponder. They're not a tracking device. And when I say that, people are almost dismayed, like, "Well, I thought that's what they were." I said, "No, that's because you're applying human standards to an alien presence that doesn't function like a human presence. You're trying to make them have some semblance of to be like us, so to speak. But the fact is, they don't, and they're not. So the alien implant is an implanted device or an installed neurochemical action that the entity does that may actually provide them with information about you, either uploaded or downloaded, or it can be activated, in my opinion, by the neural process. And the best way I can kind of describe these invasive implantations is that in 1994, I did a presentation for 250 surgeons at John Muir Medical Hospital.
Hmm.
And in that hospital setting, we're continuing education for doctors, nurses, and other professionals. I said, we've not removed any of these objects yet. I said, but if we do, here's what we're going to find. And I said, I'm saying this publicly on film so that you can all prove me wrong if I'm off base here. I said, the first thing we're going to find about these objects, once we remove them, if they're alien in origin, and that's if they're alien, there will be no chronic or acute inflammatory cells around the object. Well, of course, most doctors don't buy into that, because if you get a splinter and it goes in too deep, the body will wall it off, and it'll harden the area so that it's not so that it's isolated from the body. If it's too close to the outside, it'll just swell up with white blood cells and so on, and become very painful. What I'm saying is that whatever these objects are, metal or whatever, they will not have any inflammatory process around them. In other words, your body's not even going to know they're there. The second thing, there will be nerve cells in attendance and a nerve supply that's inappropriate for that area that will be attached to the implant. Again, the doctor sitting there scratching their heads like, what? Third is the objects will be absent from any discernible technology. There will be no technology in the object. And the fourth thing that I mentioned is that the metal, plastic, ceramic implants, whatever they turn out to be, are probably no more than 40 years old, 40 to 50 years old at the most. And of course, we did our first surgery about a year and a half later, and every one of the things I predicted came to pass. Literally from the from the pathologist who reviewed it, he said, "What is this?" Of course, I didn't want to tell him anything. I just said, "Well, just tell me what it is." He said, "Well, it looks like an inflammatory process around the cocoon around the object." And I said, "Well, test it." And he said, "Well, it's probably inflammatory." I said, "I don't want to know probably. I want to know exactly what it is." And he did study it, and he says, "Oh my gosh, there's no acute or chronic inflammatory process here whatsoever." That's weird.
Very.
I said, "Where did you find it?" I said, near deep inside the body." He said, "Mr. Sims, that's impossible." He said, "This material is keratin. Keratin is your fingernails, surface skin, and hair. Keratin cannot be inside the body, deep inside the body, surrounding a metallic. It's impossible." Well, that's exactly what I wanted to hear, because I knew it was going to be a real medical difficulty thing for this guy.
I heard that people who have had their implants removed are still being able to be tracked and therefore taken, which again, just like you said, they're not transistors.
Now the alien knows where you're at, and if they needed an implant to find you, how did they find you to begin with? So that, as you say, that couldn't make sense. So it's not a tracking device. It's not a transponder. The alien finds you, in my opinion, by something we might refer to as a neural print. In other words, everyone gives off a different signature. You can call it an aura. You can call it anything you want. But they know where you're at. It's not like it's a big secret.
Now,
so implants have nothing to do with tracking.
another thing is that, let's see here, with regards to the implants, that people's electricity that's running through their body is what's powering them. Do you know about that?
Well, I know there are a lot of statements that were made, especially on the internet, about implants that are simply unprovable and or not true, simply because we don't know that the implants are quote unquote powered at all. Some of them seem to be quite sedentary and don't seem to be doing anything until something else like the alien shows up to activate them, so to speak. So proving that would be a real good challenge. And again, all you got to do is do it in the laboratory and find out. And again, it's basic science. If it's true, then it's replicable. If it's true to science, it's a replicable experiment and it can be done over and over and over. I have not seen that demonstrated even one time.
I heard that, well, based on the 17 surgeries, Dr. Roger Lear, may he rest his soul, that originally people who had implants from the 40s, 50s, and 60s, they were placed in innocuous areas like an arm, a hand, etc. And as soon as they were starting to be removed, they were placed in places that were impossible to surgically be removed, such as up your nose, or in your ear, or inside your head. That way we cannot remove them without harming someone or even killing them. What do you know about that?
Well, again, this is one of the falsities that, in my opinion, um, and and since I discovered the implants in 1960, when I was 12 years old, because I was the recipient of one at age 12 in one of my abduction events, and received a nasal implant during that time, and the as an example. Let me back up. Roger wrote a book on the implants, and I said, I wish you hadn't done that. And he says, why not? And I said, well, I've read your book, and there's a lot of statements in there are simply not correct. Well, they're all on the right side. And I said, no, they're not. All the ones you showed me are on the certain side of the body. I said, yes. I didn't show you everything, Roger. They're on the other side. They're also in the middle. They're in the back.
In the
I said, wish you hadn't done that.
right?
You should have waited. And he said, well, anyway, he kept telling everybody they're only on a certain side of the body. It's just simply not true. We find them from the feet to behind the eye, located near the brain, in the nasal passage, in the ear, behind the ear. I've got one guy that's got 7 of them located behind his ear in a large lump. We found some of them at the base of the spine. Just goodness sakes, we found them in just different locations. It's all kinds. I got one lady that we did the surgical intervention on in India. She had one in her clavicle area, up in the subcutaneous area, which was easy to see, but she had 2 others, one in her thigh and one in her side, that the surgeon was extremely interested in. He said, if you come back to India, please let me work with you on removing these. And I said, I certainly will call you if that should happen. So, wow, they're rare, but they are, and they're not just metallic. We've had an ocular implant, one that came out of the eye.
Yeah.
After a mass abduction, this thing was appeared to be have a ceramic outside and a cushion inside. We think it housed a biological camera, and they were literally watching a circumstance during that 3-day period.
I'm glad you mentioned the fact of whether they're ceramic or metal, because Bob Lazar recently said that now, as opposed to when he was working at S4, that there's a fine line between ceramic and metal. And so the metals that they use probably have properties of both.
That's entirely possible. One of the evidences given to me by the late Dr. Carla Turner was a biological evidence. She gave it to me, and I said, have you had this thing tested? And she said, yes. She said it was removed vaginally from a lady who was sexually assaulted by something that she described as pig-like in nature.
Hmm.
And I said, were there any witnesses? She said, yes. A man came forward. And he said he was on board the craft as well, and admitted that he'd seen the same thing. And I said, you've had it tested? And she said, yes. I had a forensic expert friend of mine test the materials. Said he brought it back to me, got mad at me, and told me in no uncertain terms, don't you ever bring anything like that back to me again. And
Why
said
would
that
he
compound
say that
cannot
to her?
exist in that matrix.
Why would he say something like that to her?
Well, if you've been in the intelligence business as I have, if you come up with something that is like off world or literally from another world or something like that, and it's provable, you don't want to be sitting on that. If you're like a forensic expert, they're going to start watching you. I mean, they don't know you kept some of the material. They don't know, there are a lot of reasons you don't want to be involved, even as a doctor, in some of these cases, because if it turns out that you're not hyping and that this stuff is real and it's replicable and testable, this is pretty amazing stuff.
Can you describe the types of implants, the shape, the size, what they look like, etc.? Because the one that I held in my hand was the triangular one.
Well, they're different. Everything from I've got one that I just came to me not this week, literally, and was also in the foot, and it is very similar to the first one we extracted, which is a needle-like projection. It's about a quarter-inch long. Looks like a bright shard of metal, but it's perfectly round. And the problem is he didn't step on it because it's on the top of the foot where the other one was as well. And we're going to be excited to remove that one because if it turns out to be the same material as the other two people that we did the first two surgeries on, it's going to be remarkable because the material was extraterrestrial in origin with 11 different elements surrounding it that should not have been there.
Where was your implant placed?
Mine was located in the nasal passage.
Ooh, so you had to feel or hear that large crunch as they put that rod up in there and break through whatever it is to get inside.
Yeah, they didn't use any anesthesia whatsoever. It was quite painful. I was wide awake during the time and was screaming at the time because it was very painful.
How many implants do you yourself have collected all of these decades?
Well, over the years, we probably have, in fact, we still got some in labs looking at them. Probably, I'm going to say probably close to 20 implants.
Wow.
So you got to understand that a lot of the surgeries that are done, some of the surgeries are done, even though a person is an abductee, even though they have an interesting, strange object in their body, they are absolutely sure 1,000% that that's an alien implant. In most cases, they are not. So even if you did 20 surgeries, you may only come up with 1, 2, or 3 or 4 objects that are actually alien in origin.
Or even zero, right?
That's possible. That is entirely possible.
Now, I know from before Roger Lear's passing and Elliot Marzulli and Richard Saw took one of the implants to be tested, and they found that it was, first of all, during the removal of the surgery during the surgery of the removal of the implant, the darn thing was moving. It was moving about. It's like the implant itself didn't want to come out. It took about an hour to locate, where it had moved to. And the weird thing is once it came out, the implant itself, it's like it shut down because it's like it was feeding off our electricity. And then when they had it tested to a laboratory, the thing that scared me the most or shocked me the most was it was sending a signal that's consistent with deep space. What do you make of that?
I heard that story, and and several other scientists also heard that, and they sent a list of questions to Roger and to me. They were the same questions, and I told them I did not know anything like that. I said I'm an ex-cop. You know, saying stuff doesn't mean anything to me. It's what's provable. And anyway, the scientist sent these questions over to Roger, and he never did answer them. And the reason they said that we are suspicious of some of the findings on that particular surgery is because one of the scientists said, I specifically use the type of equipment you're talking about, and that particular equipment does not do what you claim you found.
What about
So
the claim that
I didn't know I said I don't know what to say because I wasn't involved in it, so I don't know. I just don't know. But
what,
they said they never got an answer from Roger or anybody, so I don't know what the deal was.
what about the claim that these implants in certain cases create magnetism? For instance, like a bone, a human bone, when they're inside someone, that's not magnetic, yet all of a sudden, being in proximity of this implant or very, very close to it, the bone would be magnetic. How do you make of that?
Well, I think I'm going to reframe that a little bit. One of my abductees can literally take magnets and put them around her neck, all around her neck and shoulders, and she thinks that she has implants all through her neck and body. Well, there are people that are not abductees that can do the same thing. You can see them on the internet. That they, for some reason, have magnetic capabilities in their body, and no one's given me a really good answer as why that is. There's no question it's true. But we know that, like in the first surgeries, the first three objects were removed from a lady. Two of the objects were magnetic, and another one wasn't. Now, that was very strange. Nobody understood why that was, but they were the perfect T-shape, capital T-shape formation. As soon as I removed the biological covering, they clicked together. They literally were magnetized. But I don't know about bone itself being magnetized. I don't know how you would magnetize bone, but there are all kinds of things that can be done with magnetism. I mean, they're elevating bowling balls, frogs, and all kinds of things like that. And like I say, you can see stuff like that on the internet. And again, these are not related in any way, shape, or form, quote unquote, to the alien, but are just scientific discoveries that we're coming up with. Maybe there's some facet of that is part of that. I don't know. The testing that we've had in universities and different places has not been able to substantiate some of those claims. That's just all I can say about it.
Let me give another shout out to Rockstar. Thank you so much for your super chat and your support. I deeply appreciate it for you and the Blue Crew. Okay, Derel, another question for you here. Let me ask you this. Is there areas on Earth that have higher concentrations of UFO landings or ETs, etc., as opposed to others who are just barren?
That is a great question, and the answer is yes. And the generic answer that I can give you, it's not 100%. Believe me, it isn't. But I would say that a good 60% of it, it's a good 60 to 70% solid. If you'll start on the Rocky Mountains from up in Alaska, and follow the Rocky Mountains all the way through the Snowmass Wilderness in Colorado, all the way down through Mexico, through Central America, through South America, all the way down to Argentina, you'll find the majority of those contact events, UFO events, that sort of thing, are going to be 60 to 70% of them will be congregated in those areas.
Do we have any defenses that we are, well, clandestine defenses that maybe being in the agency, that can match their technology? Because if we're facing malevolent beings, well, then what are we going to use? 9 millimeters? I don't think that's going to make a dent.
Yeah, I think you're right. We've undoubtedly got some UFOs. We back engineered some information from. I think we're still having some huge problems with them because I think whatever we got, quote unquote, was pretty much given to us, and I don't think that the alien is going to give you anything that is going to be easy for you to tamper with. But I think that I know that we have certain skills and abilities with, for instance, the DSP satellite. DSP means Defense Systems Program, and these are there were 18 years ago. There's about 20 some now, but there were 18 geosynchronous satellites that were 2,700 miles up, and they are all looking at the Earth. They're not looking out anywhere else. They're looking here. And every 12 minutes, they go over the same area. And the interesting thing about that is I was at a conference years ago, keynoting a conference in California, and a tall gentleman met me afterward, and he said, "I was stunned by your presentation." I said, "Okay." He said, "I was, first of all, I understood why you look for evidence in the visible range, cuts, scars, lumps, bumps, and things like that. He said, but you look for evidence in the infrared and ultraviolet range." And I said, "That is correct." He said, "Could you tell me why you do that?" And I said, "Because the alien sees an infrared, ultraviolet, X-ray, and visible light at the same time. That's why when abductees go in and get taken, they'll say, 'I felt like they were scanning me.' They were. They simply were. They didn't have to have equipment to do it." And he says, "Well, the reason that fascinates me is because I'm a DSP satellite specialist." And he told me about the satellites. He said they have 3 eyes on them that they use. One is for visible light, one's for infrared, and the other one's for ultraviolet. He said, "That's where we look for things." So I said, has the DSP satellites ever seen a flying saucer? He said, "There are no flying saucers, so the answer to the question is no." I said, "Let me rephrase it. Has DSP satellites ever seen a fast or slow walker?" He said, "Of course we have, thousands of them." He said, "We have logs of every one of those events." In other words, your so-called abduction event where a UFO came down and got you and all that, it's a matter of record. But your government's never going to give it to you.
What's your take on the Men in Black? Are they ETs or are they humans trying to cover up the ETs? Because they seem to show up every time or most of the time that someone has had contact or seen a disc. And I had a guest on maybe 6 to 9 months ago, Justin Vanforth, and do you remember that very famous footage of these 2 men in black walking into a hotel in Seattle?
Yes.
He actually knows those people, by the way, and he recorded voicemails from them, or not voice, they weren't, I don't think they were supposed to be voicemails, but recorded their voices, and they scared the crap out of me. They did not sound normal. They did not sound like they were humans perpetrating a hoax or anything like that. What's your take on them?
Well, there are 2 kinds of MIBs, Men in Black type phenomena. One of them was activated and has been going on for a long time, and that's done by the alien. The answer to part of that question is, what does the alien need a MIB for? The MIBs they're basically for correcting problems. In other words, when something goes wrong and they can't fix it, the alien can't get it straightened out, they send that to fix the problem. Those come from the alien. We have numerous cases where that's happened. The second group are definitely intelligence operations, and they are part and parcel to they're attached. Let me correctly state this. They're attached. They're a separate unit that are attached to whatever needs we have for the FBI, intelligence community, or whatever, and these people are basically called upon, and they go out and interview, especially abduction cases and things like that, and they know all kinds of stuff about you that you had maybe never told anybody. So there's two kinds. One is the alien related, and the other is simply the government boys using some of their own special forces in that regard. And I don't mean special forces military. I mean special forces from let's call it the Space Force.
Yeah. To either scare you or to get all the information you have.
Whatever needs to be done, they do.
Let's talk about my labs for a moment. Military abductions. So why does the military abduct people, and why do some people who are abducted say that they have seen military soldiers, human military soldiers, side by side with ETs on board a so-called craft? It's just, to me, it just boggles my mind.
Well, it should. One of the things that Dr. Carla Turner and I would often discuss is she would talk to me about the MyLab situation. She says, "Oh, well, I understand you." She said, "I understand that you actually showed one of your abductees how to defend herself," and I said, "I did." He said, "And the woman tore the eye cover off of the alien on 2 occasions." I said, "That is correct." She said, "Wow, that's incredible. We need to do the same thing with these MyLab cases." And I said, Candy was, anybody that knew Dr. Carla Turner, her nickname was Candy. I said, "Candy," I said, "I'm not being difficult here. I just have to get a few things straight." First of all, it hadn't been proven to me that that's going on. This was in 1992, I think it was, when we were talking. And I said, "It doesn't mean it isn't happening. I'm just not finding any evidence of it." And she says, "Like, give me an example." I said, "Okay." I said, "A lady came to me and told me, and she had also talked to you and said she got abducted by these military guys." And I said, "Okay, how did it happen?" She said, "They came into my house in the middle of the night with M16s and military police type guys." And I said, "Okay." And then what happened? She said, "They took me down the street, and they went down a manhole cover, and they're like 80 stories down. They went underground to an underground base, blah, 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 blah." And I said, "Okay." And I said, "I've got my cop hat on listening to this stuff." I said, "That cop hat's a lot more definitive than your UFO hat.
I would think
It's
so.
going to require proof, and it's going to question you to the hilt." So I said, "Candy," I said, the thing is, I said, first of all, I went down her street and to the so-called sewer hole, the sewer lid where they went down. You know what's down there? Sewer.
Huh.
There is no underground base there. That's number one. Number two, says military police guys came in the middle of the night with M16s. Why would a military police guy? I said, I'm a senior military police officer. I am. I would never abduct any human being, an American citizen, for any reason. But be that as it may, suppose that's happened.
And play it
Why would
off
they
as
need to take
ET,
an
right?
M16 and drag a woman out of her house with her family there? No one saw it. No one heard it. No one anything. I said, it sounds like to me that she either made it up, dreamed it up, or maybe had an alien experience and maybe they used that as a screen memory. I said, I'm not saying that my labs don't exist. I'm saying her case didn't didn't stand the muster. And I said, and you know her and I know her. I said, the woman is harmless. You don't need an M16 to get her to go anywhere. All you have to do is use harsh words. And she'd start crying and she'd go with you in a minute. So none of that makes sense. I mean, what if a police officer came and rolling by at 3 o'clock in the morning and saw these two M16 guys with in military uniforms off a military base taking a woman in her nightgown down the street toward the local sewer?
Yeah.
That's not going to fly. It's
No,
just,
it isn't.
I say it doesn't work. But it doesn't mean that military abductions don't happen. They could. They certainly could. I'm not saying they can't. I said, but when you investigate each case has to stand on its own merits. It can't be based on, well, I believe or I think or it must have been. There's got to be evidence, and there is evidence if you know what you're looking for.
Now, there's someone from our history, Philip J. Corso, and he claims before, and I read the book the day after Roswell, he claimed that he was given a artifacts in a three I don't know how you call it, like a drawer, like a three-level drawer. And he described these different artifacts, and he went to places like IBM and so on and so forth. And he says that that's what they reverse engineered that, and through after they reverse engineered it goes to the military first, and then a decade or two or even longer later, then consumers see it. What do you take? What's your take on Corso?
Well, I met Corso, the 50th anniversary of Roswell. Like him, he's a good man and a patriot. Um, the best way I can answer that is one day we were shooting a TV show, a reality show called Uncovering Aliens. Me and Mike Barra and a Marine uh, and another guy were filming this, and we had a guy named Dr. Bob Wood, who is quite famous in the UFO
Ah,
world,
I know Bob Wood.
and is a good,
Yes,
very
great
good
guy.
man.
Yes.
And he came there. We're interviewing him, and he was producing evidence of back engineered stuff from not from not a copy of a letter, but actual data he had, the original stuff. His letters were original letters, so he had really good substantiation to his case, which I really appreciated that. During the middle of the shoot, we took a break. It was so hot, and everybody went over to get a Coke or a drink, and he said, "Derel, may I speak to you privately?" And I said, "Sure." And he asked me some questions about the intelligence community and some of the things I've been involved in and so on. And then he said, "My next question to you is the following." He said, "How old do you think the alien phenomena is? How far do you think they are ahead of us?" And I laughed and I said, "Well, I'd really rather not say, Doc." I said, "I'll probably get laughed out of the building if I told that answer." And he said, everybody was walking back at that point and they overheard the conversation and they were all ears straight up. And I said, "I'm really not comfortable telling everybody that." I said, "I know it and I believe it because I back it up myself." But he said, "No, I really want to know. I truly want to know what you think." And I said, "Okay." I said, "The alien is no more than 15 to 50 years ahead of us."
Wow. That's it.
And I mean to tell you, all the crew, the director, the executive director, all of them that were there, busted out laughing at my answer. They thought it was the most ignorant answer ever. They thought my material, my stuff was great, but that was the one answer they just totally 100% disagreed with. Until they quit laughing when Dr. Bob Wood spoke up. He looked at me and said, "Oh my God, those are the exact figures I came to."
Wow.
He said,
That
"How did you come to that conclusion?" I said, "When I was 12 years old, I got a nasal implant, and I said I was wide awake during the event, and I also taught myself how to interfere to hear their conversations when they switch you off so you're not supposed to remember.
hmm
I learned how to switch myself back on. And I heard what they were going to do to me, and I studied that later when I got older in encyclopedias and things like that, medical books, and I figured out what they had done, and they were no more than 15 to 50 years ahead of us then." He said, "Derrel, that is absolutely brilliant." He said, "Wow." He said that, of course, nobody's laughing at this time. They're all sitting there shocked because here's the man, and here I am. They had the implant studies saying the exact same things, basically singing their own in the same choir. So I think they're no more than 15 to 50 years ahead of us. And let me reference it this way. And again, some of your some some people in the audience may have a real problem with this, but it's just data to me. Uh, so the bottom line is this: uh, the alien phenomena, the quote unquote abduction phenomena, is no more than 150 to 200 years old, no more.
That's interesting, obviously, because of the old cave paintings from 30,000 years BC, other paintings, but you're right, they don't show anything that would indicate that someone was taken. I did uncover, it's on my website somewhere now. It's a medical journal from Britain, and it's from in the 1890s, maybe 1890, 1895, and it shows someone lying down on a tiny, thin bed, and you have these very skinny, giant head, bald, almond-eyed ETs doing something to him. But then again, that would fall under the 150 years, so that
True.
makes sense.
But for the audience, that doesn't mean that UFOs or the alien hasn't been here around. They have, but interacting with mankind in this in the way they're doing with the abduction phenomena, probably no more than 150 to 200 years at the most. At the most, UFOs have been seen for thousands of years. They are recorded
Tens of
in
thousands of years,
petroglyphs and
even,
rock
right?
formations and all kinds of stuff. No question that's true.
Tens of
But their
thousands of
interaction with
years.
us has been different.
Yeah, tens of thousands of years if you count the old cave painting in France. That was like 36, 37,000 years old. So yeah, you're absolutely right that have they've been around, and obviously every ancient story, if including the Bible, Ezekiel, the ancient Mayans, basically every culture on this planet has some sort of indication that they were getting wisdom from the gods. But again, that doesn't mean they were being taken. Uh, do you know? Do you have a hypothesis why they started taking us? Is it because we started destroying our planet through A bombs, or maybe they were trying to create a new race to populate the Earth once we blow ourselves up? Or what's your opinion?
My thinking is that again, I follow the ancient ancient records as much as possible. Everything from Workin to Sumerian to Hebrew to Indian documents, even the Basque and other documents. These are all of these together give us a pretty good thumbnail of what to look for. And it seems, and I'll underscore this with a little quick story. Um, it seems that there were different programs run by not the alien, because the alien is a program himself.
Mm-hmm.
That is just a program that's being operated in the last 150, 200 years. Before that, there were things called transgenics. These were certain kinds of created, hatch, clone, made, or manufactured. Again, the same thing, but they were done different types of animals, and even some human were put together, so to speak, in the DNA to create and to cause a transgenic, such as the satyr is a good example, things like that, and you'll see them sometimes through history. Before that, there was another program that was much older, which I refer to as the giant program.
Mm-hmm.
A good example is when the scientists in, I think it was 1929, went up with some of the Peruvians to Machu Picchu to look at it for the first time for their own eyes. They told the little Peruvian people, "You're so smart. Look at all the wonderful things you created. Your great grandfathers and your relatives did." And the Peruvians looked at them and said, "What? We didn't do that. The giants did it." And all over the world, you'll hear stories of giants and what they did. In my opinion, the so-called Stone Age didn't have anything to do with mankind. It had to do with the stone structures that you see out there. Many of them, not all of them, but many of them were put together by them, the giants, which were,
I've
again, just another program.
I have a friend. He doesn't want me to use his name when we talk about the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency, that he said during one of his tours in Afghanistan, they came across a 10 to 12-foot being, several hundred pounds, and this being killed 12 American soldiers, and it took bullets like nothing was harming it. And it was growling almost as if it hadn't spoken in years, or if it was a language, it's definitely not something we know about. A very hairy being, and once they finally killed it, it took two Chinook helicopters to transport it because of the weight of it. The weight of it, by the way, was about 1,200 pounds. Do you know that story?
I do, and I know some of the people that were reportedly involved in it. It's called the Giant of Kandahar,
Yes, thank
and
you. Yes, yes,
yeah,
yes. You just said it
that's
above me.
I'm familiar with that. Once I put my cop hat on, I look at every aspect of the case to see how valid it is or not. But we have a case of our own in a foreign country where a lady was taken, and the handprints of the entity that took her on her bare skin, on her stomach and her back.
Hmm.
He had his hand on one side of her body, and I made a sculpture made of the hand. The sculpture weighed over 24 pounds. The hand was that big, and it left caustic burns of the woman's on her back and on her stomach. And I think it's probably on my website, alienhunter.org. But anyway, the point is that most giants, not all of them, but most giants are polydactyl. They have 6 fingers and 6 toes. This one seems to have 6 fingers as well, and the caustic burns that were left on her. So there's a giant still roaming around out there somewhere in a foreign country.
And if there's one and it has sexual organs, we can assume that there's probably more.
That be correct.
Now, you mentioned Dr. Bob Wood, great friend of mine, and fantastic interview. His son, Ryan Wood, wrote a book on crash and retrievals, and I was astounded to find out how many there were. What's your take on that? How many do you think that we've recovered ET craft?
Well, I don't know how many we've recovered because they're never going to tell us.
That's right.
But there have been some as far back as in the 20s and 30s that have been reportedly taken, and I say reportedly because I can't prove that no more than I can prove the Roswell event happened. I have good anecdotal evidence of that it did, and I have eyewitnesses uh, from some of the generals on down to some of the relatives, but that still doesn't prove quote unquote anything. I think that it happened, and I think there are plenty of other events that have happened where these. But and let me give you Roswell as an example, kind of a model that you might be able to use on some other ideas. Um, Roswell, in my opinion, was a setup.
Huh.
The crash.
Meaning?
There were at least two craft, at least two. Some people say three. I'm not. I won't argue it because I wasn't there. I don't know.
Yeah,
But
one at
some people
Corona,
say that
right?
one crashed at Roswell, one crashed at Corona. Be that as it may, that's not my point here. The point is that two craft crashed, and the question is, does the alien have a drinking problem, or they can't fly their own craft, or why would you bounce a craft off another craft and right in the exact proximity of the literally the Roswell Army Air Force Base
the
where the nukes are being stored,
That's
so to
right.
speak.
The Trinity site
Doesn't make
too.
any sense. Unless, of course, you're an alien. Then it makes a lot of sense. In my opinion, Roswell wasn't an accident. It wasn't caused by radar. It wasn't caused by whatever. There are all kinds of theories about what happened. They did it on purpose, and they didn't care how many of their little guys died or not. It doesn't matter. They're like toasters. They got a million of them anyway. They can replace them easily. So the real question for me was, why would they do that? And the answer to me is, again, from the intelligence point of view, makes a lot of sense. If you're an alien and if you want to land on the White House lawn, that would be a huge mistake. No one will ever trust you. No one will ever believe that you're here to save the planet or whatever. That's not going to buy it. However, if you crash a craft and let us capture it, even a live alien, then we'll trust that because we think we're in charge. And that's exactly what happened. The problem is that the alien that did survive, and they only needed one, the alien that survived, that guy, any abductee or contactee can tell you, any of them worth their salt, will tell you if an alien's standing in front of you on a craft or wherever, and they want to know something, they will upload or download information out of your head so fast make your head spin. Well, guess who that alien got to sit in front of? General Nathan Twining, the
Huh.
head of the military industrial complex. Who knows more about what we're doing with nukes and everything else than him? He's standing there in front of this little alien at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. They're trying to feed this thing ice cream, beans, or whatever. I mean, they're so stupid they can't figure out the thing is listening to everything everybody's saying.
That's right.
And that's going to be uploaded to the aliens who come in and beam in and check him out. They said, "Well, why didn't they beam him out? They could have at any time. Why didn't they? Because they're getting great information. It's the best intelligence operation I have ever heard of, and we lost big."
When I was young, I used to hear that the captured ET liked strawberry ice cream. What do you say about that?
I hear all kinds of stories. They where they try to feed him all kinds of stuff. The alien actually his strawberry's the right color, but the taste should be more blood.
Is the reason why the taste is blood, is it because they are eating us?
I don't think they're eating us. I think they absorb blood in a particular way, and that's the reason some of them smell so bad.
Ah, I never thought of that. Thank you for telling me that. Uh, now, how many? Okay, you said the crashes started in about 150 years ago. What about the Dropa Stone incident that's supposedly 10,000 years old? What do you say about that?
I've read the story and all that, and I don't know. Um, it's a fascinating story. There are a lot of things out there that are really fascinating, but I don't know how you'd prove it and to any degree of satisfaction. In other words, if the alien was here from the Dropa stones, the ones that made the stones, uh, where are they?
True. Very
How come they
true.
weren't smart enough to to leave any indication of where their existence other than a rock, so to speak? I think I could have done a little better than that. Good night. We've even got plastic that'll last for years, for probably 1,000 years. Uh, and if we're not even not very advanced according to the alien, we've got plastics and other materials that last for thousands, tens of thousands of years, and they couldn't do anything better than a rock. It doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't mean the story's not true. To me, I just have all the case has to make sense. Whenever I work a murder case or a kidnapping, everything has to work. You can't have, oh, well, we caught the guy, so that's all we need to know. No, that's not all you need to know. You actually need to know every detail, because there are cases where in murder cases we have people who literally will call in and say, I did it. And one of the reasons we don't give information out on how the murder happened or whatever, like for instance, a guy will say, I stabbed her, in the neck. I stabbed her in the neck 3 times or whatever, and come find out she was shot. But so we don't tell people some of these facts because there are people who will go out and literally create their own scenario. They'll actually make it up, and there are people in the UFO community who do the same thing.
Now, here's a question for you. This is from Nell. How did he find these implants?
Great question. How do you find implants? One of the ways is uh, my own case. I knew they existed because I was wide awake watching it. In fact, when I went to the VA hospital, the doctor, the ENT, the ear, nose, throat specialist, looked in my nasal passage and says, when did you have that surgery? That's what surgery was at. And he said, there's in the nasal septum, that middle bone in the middle of your nose, somebody's cut a complete circle in the inside of your nasal passage. And I didn't tell him, but I later told my physician, primary care physician at the VA hospital. I told her what happened when I was 12 years old, and she sat there stunned. And I said, that's where I got a nasal implant, and they're the ones that cut me and did that. And I said, I remember it. In fact, there was blood on my pillow that morning when my mother got onto me and said, you've been picking your nose? And I said, yeah, that's what I did, because I didn't want her to know. I didn't tell her. So
What? Go ahead.
the bottom line is that the way you can find an implant, if you think you have one, and almost every abductee thinks they do, and they don't, because I tell people that because I don't like them getting scared for no reason. If you think you do have an implant, as an example, in your hand or wherever you think it's at, go get an X-ray. That's the best and easiest and cheapest way to do it. Don't go to your primary care physician and say, I have an alien implant. I need to get an x-ray. The answer is going to be, no, get out of my office. They think you're nuts. Go to a chiropractor and tell them that you bumped your hand or wherever you think the object is, and you need to get an x-ray of the area to make sure everything's okay. Don't mention the word alien or implant or anything.
Yeah, they'll
Just
throw
get the
you the
x-ray
puzzle factory.
and then send the x-ray to me or a scan of it on the internet, and or go to alienhunter.org and click on Alien Hunter, and it'll email me directly. I answer all my emails, and I'll look at your x-ray and give you a good, strong opinion about what it is or isn't.
Now, let me take you back 2,000 years. What's your take on Jesus being the most decorated hybrid? If Angel Gabriel was in fact an ET, and the three kings were following the star, which happened to be a UFO, uh, do you think that's plausible? Do you think that Jesus Christ was in fact an ET hybrid?
No, I don't. I don't buy that at all for a lot of reasons. Number one is that if anybody's actually studied astronomy, there was a correlation of celestial objects that actually look like one complete star in the east. The Magi were absolutely 100% correct, and they watched the stars all the time. So if there was something new in the sky or something lined up that was not normal, they would know it before anybody. And so that the Magi were simply who they were. In fact, the prophet Daniel probably was in the school of the Magi at one time. Very much likely that was the case. But Jesus Christ was, in my opinion, was who he said he was, and who history said he was, and they haven't proven anything different yet. I don't know if any aliens are out raising anyone from the dead. I don't know any aliens are out there doing anything like he has done.
Like Lazarus,
I find it rather interesting too that when you get into the intelligence level of the alien phenomena, if you get into conspiracy stuff, I'm not saying it's real or not. I'm just saying when you get into that level of it, one of the things you're not allowed to mention in any way, shape, or form in the presence of the alien in the intelligence level, like the underground base, Area 51 or wherever, you're not allowed to mention the name of Jesus.
Interesting.
Now, if Jesus was an alien, why can't you mention his name? But if he was the Son of God, now that might create a real problem for someone.
You mentioned underground base like Area 51 or the deep levels of, say, S4, right? What do you think about the Dulce base?
I just did a conference this last year at the Dulce base area for the Native Americans, and they invited me there to be the keynote speaker, and I was listening to some of the other presentations. I was sitting back at my table with all my implants and evidence and things back there, watching it, and an elderly Native American gentleman walked up and he said, "What do you think about the underground base at Dulce and all that?" And I laughed and said, "I don't think much." I said, "You mean up here on the mesa?" I said, "I don't believe there is one up there." He said, "But everybody says there is." And I said, "You just asked my opinion. I just gave you my opinion." I said, "I don't know for sure because I haven't dug all through the mountains, so I don't know. But in my opinion, from an intelligence point of view, that's got to be a huge mistake." He said, "Why is that?" And I said, "Listen, I worked in the intelligence community at one of the top secret places in the country. We would place things in plain sight to mislead people. I think Dulce is one of those things."
Counterintelligence.
And the Native American is an old guy, and he looked at me and laughed and said, "You really are an alien hunter, aren't you?" And I said, why do you think that? And he says, because there ain't no base up there.
Huh.
He said, but Mr. Sims, he said, when you come back, I will take you to where the underground base is at. He said, you're right. It's not up there. It's somewhere else. I said, you always want to give these cover stories. A cover story is a lie.
Yeah. Of
It's just a
course.
lie. It's just that simple. And the better the cover story is, the better the lie is, and it looks just like the truth when you're finished with it. Anyway, so next time I go to the Dulce area, I'm supposedly going to get a trip to the underground base. So we'll find out if it's real or not.
Oh, and I hope you're able to film it. That'd be great.
That'd be
Okay,
awesome, wouldn't it?
I got two questions here for you. Let me go back to the first one. Nicholas Cashmore asks, what was the big statement, please? What was his big statement, please?
Once again, please.
What was his big statement, please? Your big statement.
My big statement.
Yeah.
Uh, the big statement of what's it reference to?
I don't know, but there's a follow-up question for Mr. Cashmore, which is,
Okay.
what is the alien plan for humanity?
Good. That's a great question. First of all, I don't think they have any plans for humanity because what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay out a model here that will, I hope, make things a lot clearer. Um, my model is my thesis is the following: that the alien, all seven of them, all seven flavors, are not races but models. In other words, think of them as a cosmic car company. If it was if this was the cosmic Chevrolet company, you have like the Corvette Stingray on one end, the top model, and down to the lowest model, which be the little gray alien, the little Chevette, so to speak. But they're all models. Some are far better than others, no question about it. The question one has to be asking is this: who made them? If they're made, hatched, cloned, or manufactured, who made them? And that's what Sitchin's book's about. That's what a lot of the ancient documents are all about. And if you consider that and look at those documents and take the whiskers off of them, so to speak, and address it in some realistic terms, according to Sitchin, the gods came down from the heavens. That's not actually the correct rendering. And when I saw that was not a correct rendering, I went to a friend of mine who was a Sumerian scholar, and I said, why is it that Sitchin can't interpret or translate properly Sumerian and ancient Hebrew when he claims to be a scholar of both? And the Sumerian, who is also a Hebrew and Ugaritic scholar, said, you're exactly right. He said he didn't translate it correctly. I said, I know that. I'm not a scholar, and I know better than that. And he said, I said, what it actually says, and they'll give you the short version of it, it says they got kicked out of heaven and came down to earth. That's a better rendering. So the question is, the so-called gods that came down from the heavens, they either came down from the heavens, no, they got kicked out with the number 12 boot. They got thrown out for whatever crimes they had committed, and they came down to earth, which to me is a specialized project that God himself had actually made. And if you got kicked out of your favorite place, you might want to go to wherever the favorite place of the guy that kicked you out and go down there and raise some havoc. And I think that's exactly what they did. And they did it with a program called Giants and Giantism. They came later and did it with transgenics. And then they came back later, did it with alien phenomena. And then you talk about Jesus again. Jesus himself said, when his disciples asked him a question, what will be the end of the age? What's it going to be like? Tell us, the big one. And he said, men's hearts will fail them for fear, seeing the things that are going to come upon the earth. Think like outer space, like UFOs. And then he said that they will be marrying and giving into marriage. And that has a very specific meaning in the Hebrew. And it actually has reference to, it actually goes back to the giants. Jesus is way ahead of everybody in this thing. He is, in fact, in my opinion, the Son of God. He was telling them the truth. He said all the stuff that happened way back then, it's coming back again. The transgenics, all you have to do is go on the internet and type in the word transgenic and hit images, and you'll see a human ear on a mouse. You'll see all kinds of things they're starting to do, just like they did several thousand years ago, that the fallen ones did with humanity and animals, creating half beings, half this, half all kinds of stuff. That Jesus said that same thing is going to happen again in the end time. And right now it's happening in China. It's happening in other countries. I could tell you story after story. There's no point in doing that. All you got to do is go research it yourself. Don't believe anything I say. Go research it yourself. And I think you'll be horrified when you see what man is already doing.
There's two questions for you here. The first one is a follow-up to the one that you were asking. Let me just go reverse order. Donetta Stafford, can you explain screen memories?
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. Great question. You have a great audience tonight. Really great.
Thank
A
you.
screen memory is the first. It's the best way to think of screen memories is they are a fake memory given by the alien to cover up what they've actually done or what's actually transpired. The alien is the inventor of the false memory syndrome. That's what a screen memory is. For instance, people will come back, they'll have an event, I'll give you a perfect example. One of my abductees in 1992, I think it was, came to me, and he's an engineer. He said, I need for you to work with me. He said, I don't know what to say. He said, I said, well, what happened? He said, well, we're coming back from a gold hunting trip, and we're coming through Fort Collins, Colorado, and it looks like some red lights and blue lights down there. We think it's an accident on the highway in the middle of the night. And he said, we rolled up right next to it with our pickup, and we realized those are not police lights. They were lights on a UFO, and they're aliens standing outside.
Interesting.
He said, the next thing I remember, he said, the guy and I and our truck are in Dalhart, Texas. Not in Colorado. We're in Dalhart, Texas. And he's driving the truck when I was driving the truck before. So the screen memory, and the guy looks over at Dale and says, did you see that elk? I said, Dalhart, Texas, the tallest thing out there is about 3 foot tall, and it's weeds. And I said, there aren't any elk out there, so to speak. And he says, I know, but the screen memory is the elk. Large black eyes is the key. They'll talk about, well, I saw a 3 foot owl walking down the street at 3 o'clock in the morning. Why are you walking down the street at 3 in the morning looking for 3 foot tall owls with large black eyes? These are screen memories. They're fake memories given to cover up, to mask what has actually really happened.
Okay, here is the other one. Actually, wow, there's more questions for you. Well, before I get to this other one, here it goes. Now, do you have anything about just one person in 5 have a soul?
I would be a little hard to test that. So, in my opinion, every human being is born with a soul and a spirit. And to me, there's good evidence of that. But and I think that Earth is for lack of a better term, the testing place for people for for the project that God initially started mankind out on, and I think he's been tampered with and interfered with by the alien and by the fallen ones. And there's a curious statement mentioned in the book of the Bible, which states that the Apostle Paul says that, "Know ye not that you will judge the angels that sinned? Those are the fallen ones." Now, the question one might ask is, why would the Apostle Paul tell these Christians that he's talking to, you're going to end up judging these fallen angelics? The reason for that is the fallen angelics are they're the problem. They have created more difficulties on planet Earth than anybody can imagine, much more than we know. And I suspect when the end of this unravels, so to speak, and it's all called into an account, just like going to court or anything else, there's going to be a judge. And the judge at that point says that these ones who were specifically hammered by these fallen angelics, they're going to answer for that, and that we're going to judge them personally. That's the narrative biblically. So the indication is pretty clear from that and from other ancient documents around, in my opinion, around the world, that in fact man has an immortal soul and a spirit, and and again, this is a testing period for that. And that I think that that's just my opinion, and everybody could agree or disagree with it. But I don't know how you'd prove, quote unquote, whether how many people have souls or not. It's pretty clear to me that everybody was born with one. You got one getting here, and that at some point that'll all be called into account. And again, even the fallen angelics will be called into account as well. So that's just my take on it.
Okay, Nicholas Cashmore, I'm going to read the first part again, and then there's two more, so I'm going to read them all three. Let me just get to them because they're separated by a multitude of questions. All right, let's go back to the first one, which was about what was your big statement, please? And then the follow-up to that was, let's see here, a lot of questions, a lot of comments, so that's good.
Good.
Okay, let's see, where's the rest of it? No, I don't see it. Okay, all right. I'll see if I can grab them together again. But here's another one for you. This is again from Nell for you. Dolores Cannon say they are the backdrop people in the hologram world. What do you say about that statement?
I am reasonably familiar with Dolores Cannon's work, and I like her as a person. I met her, and I like her. I do not agree with her thesis of how she comes. Okay, you can hypnotize people and ask them all kinds of questions, and I'm a master hypnotherapist. Let me explain a little bit to your audience about this. A master hypnotherapist is a person who certifies people like Dolores Cannon. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Somebody has got to test you and train you and so on. I'm the person who certifies hypnotherapists when they want to get their rating as an example. So I probably know a little bit about hypnosis that probably regular hypnotists don't. I am a hypnotic anesthesia therapist. That means I take people to surgery and do hypnotic anesthesia in surgery with them.
Without actually having general anesthesia, right?
Yeah, as opposed to having general or a local anesthesia. I also am a medical hypnotherapist, and I'm a clinical hypnotherapist, and a forensic hypnotherapist. What does all that mean? It means probably I know a little bit more than most hypnotists do. Not everybody, but I've got a huge background in the field. And a guy challenged me down in Brazil one time on the radio, and I said, "Please don't do that." And he said, "No," he said, I hypnotize people, and I've and we've got these incredible information from, other worlds and all kinds of stuff. And I said, I don't care what you believe. That's your business. I said, but I wouldn't, with your background, I wouldn't do that. And he insisted. Well, needless to say, I shredded him into little pieces, asking him questions he just had no answers to. And I said, I asked you not to do that because I'm not here to insult you or to make you look small or anything like that. I said, some of the techniques you're using are techniques that we use. You call their memory recovery techniques. Those are techniques used in other systems to destroy memory. And you don't even know the difference. You don't even know the difference between real memory and screen memory. You don't know the difference between screen memory and screen dreams. Oh, the guy was just mortified. I said, I asked you not to do this. I didn't come here to argue with you or to make you look small. But now you made yourself look like a three-alarm idiot in front of your audience. And so I didn't agree with Dolores' opinion about basically hypnotizing people and there are parts of people. There in therapy, there are things called parts. In other words, there's a part of me that feels like I should do the right thing. There's another part of me that doesn't agree. There's another part of me that thinks that. People have all kinds of parts. Does that make sense?
Of course.
Now, if you hypnotize some of those parts, you're going to get different kinds of answers. And they're not necessarily memory. It may sound like memory because, well, they said so under hypnosis. Hypnosis doesn't guarantee you're getting memory. Hypnosis guarantees you're getting information. Can that information be skewed? Of course it can. Case in point. A lady asked my senior investigator, who was trained by me in hypnosis. She said, I want you to hypnotize me for my past life memory. And he said, we don't do that. And she said, I want you to. And he said, I'll do it for you one time and that's it. And so she says, okay. He hypnotized her and she went to her previous life and talked about how she was a potato farmer and back in the 13th century, I think it was, in Ireland. And she goes into great detail about her life. And she said, see there, I told you I was in the previous life as a potato farmer's wife, but I'm going to live in 13th century or whatever. And he laughed and he said, you remember how Derel told us how to determine when people are lying or telling the truth just by watching them? She said, yeah. He said, I put you on video. Notice the physiology and the eye patterns, the movements you made when I asked certain questions. He said, you're hallucinating. No, I'm not. I'm a potato farmer's wife in a 13th century. I don't care what you say. You're lying. You don't know what you're talking about. He says, potatoes weren't even brought to Ireland hundreds of years later. How could you be a potato farmer's wife in the 13th century? Oh, she was furious. So it all boils down to evidence to me. And when I train somebody in hypnotherapy, they know what they're doing. They can sit and go through. I go to other countries all the time. I just came back from Istanbul, Turkey, Cosenza, Italy, and the UK on my European tour. I'm fixing to go back again to Manchester to speak a keynote conference there, and also to Istanbul, Turkey again here pretty soon. The point is, some of those people I can't speak their language, but I can watch them and I can determine whether they're lying or telling the truth or stretching. I can tell them what part of their brain they're accessing when they're talking to me. So I didn't fall off the turnip truck yesterday.
Yeah, right? Two more for you. Okay. What special powers do aliens have and how do they travel?
Those are great questions. What special powers do they have? I don't know that they have any special powers. If you study the alien, and I have for 50 years, you'll find that like the little gray is an example, has only got an IQ of about 80, 85 maybe.
Oh wow, that's pretty
They can't
low.
even get your clothes on right half the time.
Yeah.
They're made, hatched, cloned, and manufactured to be that way, to do that. They're there for minimal tasks.
By
There are other
robots, right?
there are other alien entities that are much smarter than they are, and it's probably safer to say they don't have all these remarkable abilities. They have programmed skills like telepathy and things like that. But everybody, in my opinion, is missing the point. They said, well, they're using telepathy because they're so much smarter than we are. No, that's not the real reason. That's a good reason if you don't know the answer. But that's not the answer. If you think about it long enough, you'll figure that out. And like they have people say, well, the aliens are so much smarter. I said, really? I said, most of these entities have 3 fingers and no opposing thumb. How did they build a spacecraft with no opposing thumb?
And it's the
Well, I don't
opposing
know.
thumb that
They don't.
literally makes us
A little hard
humans
to do,
to
yeah.
do a lot.
So the question is, one has to ask, you have to rephrase the question, who made the craft for them? Ah, well, the following one might be a pretty good answer.
This other question is about Dolores. Okay, I'll read it to you word for word. So, Dolores would not pass in your test to be a certified professional?
No, she can be a hypnotist. You can hypnotize people. What I'm saying is you can hypnotize people. I can hypnotize people, and I guarantee you I can have them come up with all kinds of stuff. That doesn't mean it's the truth. And if I don't know the difference, and like this young guy did it in Brazil when we had our debate on live TV and radio, he couldn't answer all these questions. The reason he couldn't answer them because he didn't know. So, but do people hypnotize people and come up with all kinds of stuff? Yes. Let me give you one last big answer for that. Everybody probably knows Dr. John Mack, or did know him when he
Oh,
was
of
alive.
course, yeah. And you
John
know
Mack's
what?
a good
His
guy.
death, his
I met him in Istanbul, Turkey. And when I talked to him there, he said, Derel, I've been wanting to talk to you for quite a while. And I said, well, good, Doc. I wanted to talk to you. And he says, why do I always get contactees and you always get abductees? And I said, that's not necessarily true, sir. And I said, now I want to honor you for your Pulitzer Prize winning writing and things like this and your work. And I said, so when I use the term argument, we're speaking in the scientific sense. And he said, totally understood. I said, okay. I said, my discussion with you and my argument is the following. The reason you have contactees is because they're predisposed to your viewpoint. They gravitate to you. I said, I get both, contactees, abductees, and people who are not abductees who think they are. I said, I've actually had a number of your people that you hypnotized and found they were in the school of higher consciousness or whatever. And when I worked with them, I found that wasn't even the case. That was a screen memory.
John
He got real
Mack's
quiet.
death.
He says, why do you think that? And I said, John, a colleague of yours, Dr. Timmerman at Tulane University, told you in 1994, I think it was, you needed to get down to Houston, Texas, and meet Dale Musser and Derrel Sims. He said they run the Houston UFO Network. He said they're light years ahead of you. I said, I know you got that letter because I have a copy of it in my file. I said, so I'm not really sure you really wanted to meet me or not. And I said, listen, John, I said, I'm going to tell you something. I said, I'm really surprised you don't know this. I said, but you can hypnotize a person like a contactee, a person that's been in the higher school of higher consciousness and this sort of thing. And you work with these people over and over. You can hypnotize them 100 times and you're going to get a different story every time. He said, what do you mean? I said, that's called a screen dream. A screen memory is a false memory.
Yeah.
A screen dream is a repeat thing that occurs over and over. And I said, John, those people have not been they have not been abducted 100 days in a row. It just ain't true. So how in the world can these people be coming up with hundreds of hours of hypnosis tapes of them being abducted when you know for a fact that they haven't, and I know they haven't. And he just sat there stunned. I said, that's called a screen dream. A screen dream is designed to throw the hypnotist off. The alien's not completely stupid. They figured we'd eventually get around to hypnotizing these people. But the problem is you have to hypnotize people under a set of standards that can be replicated by other hypnotists. And when you got 2 or 3 hypnotists hypnotizing a person and getting 3 different stories, I'll give you a hint. Something's wrong. Whenever I investigate a murder case, let's say there's a body laying there in the street and there's a knife sticking in his back and there's 8 witnesses standing there. I roll up on the scene and ask the witnesses what happened. And the witnesses all tell me 8 different stories. Guess what's going to happen to 8 people? They're all going downtown. Because that body didn't die 8 different ways. It died one way. And at least 7 of them, maybe 8, are not telling the truth. Now, they may think they're telling the truth. I'm not saying they're lying. I'm saying they're wrong. The body did not die 8 different ways. It just didn't. And that's the same thing in hypnosis. When you get 8 different stories and 8 different hypnotists are working with them, you better get another hypnotist. You need to find consistency is what I'm saying.
John Mack's death really is fishy to me. I've been to the UK more than once, and of course I've come out of a pub. Of course I'm looking both ways before I cross the street, before I get hit. It's very fishy to me. Is it an accident? Very well could be. Is it something more deliberate? Well, the possibilities are there. But either way, his death was not just a shock.
Unfortunate. Very unfortunate.
Yeah, very, very unfortunate.
He was a good man. Very good man.
Okay, there's 2 more questions here because we're running out of time, so I'm going to get them to you. Let's see. 1. Do aliens eat people?
Do they eat people?
Yeah. I've heard that some eat adrenal.
There are all kinds of weird stories out there. And again, much of this is not substantiated. The indication is that they do eat, but they do it through absorption. So do they eat people? I don't know that they do. No, we don't have any cases where the aliens were having dinner, and eating somebody. But there are reports of mutilations in the droves, including human mutilations as well.
That's right.
And in these cases, the blood, for the most part, is gone.
Yeah, it's completely drained.
Why is that?
Gosh, yeah. I've seen some of those photos of mutilated people, and does not look like something that a human can do. And then drain the body of blood completely. I mean, these are definitely weird, and obviously, if people seeing our ET craft or ETs in the area, and that's where their mind goes to, then that's a possibility. Now, I personally can't say anything about it. All I know is I've seen those pictures of the mutilated humans, and I cannot understand how they were so precise in cutting certain areas and draining the blood completely. Anyway, next question for you.
Yeah, we just had a horse mutilation up here in Houston. I just investigated it.
Yeah, horses and cattle seem to be mutilated so much. It literally blows my mind. I know the skeptics like Michael Shermer and Robert Schaefer, and before Philip Klass passed away, I'm sure you heard Travis Walton say, Philip Klass can kiss my ass, things like that. But them saying that it was done by other humans is bizarre. Another
Some of
theory.
it is stupidly bizarre because in one case, one mutilation case, a cattle mutilation, the the unborn calf that was inside the mutilated cow
Hmm.
had a human face on it.
Oh, wow. A chimera. Interesting. Very interesting.
Like
I
I said, transgenics. Jesus said transgenics is going to happen again, as it was in the day of Noah. So will it be in the Son of Man. Same thing's going to happen in the end. So you can look forward to stuff like that. It's coming. I'm telling you, it's coming big time.
the
Just check it out on the internet.
And remember, skeptics say one of the reasons why cattle were mutilated were because the blood, bovine blood, is very similar to human blood, and they were just testing something. But again, that is what the skeptics say. I've seen photos, and again, they're so precise, especially when you're looking at photos from 30, 40 years ago, look like
There's no way
lasers
we didn't have
cuts.
lasers back then. A laser
Yeah,
would be the
right?
size of a bread truck,
Yeah,
and there's no
yes.
tracks, no anything. Doesn't make it didn't happen. They don't know what you're talking about.
We didn't have a pen-sized laser that was a cutting tool, that's for sure. Anyhow, okay, let's see here. The final question I'm going to take because we've gone a couple minutes over is um let's see here. Well, there's another one if you want to ask it. It's more of a comical question if you want to answer it, but it's do aliens have orgies?
Well, if they don't have genitalia, I don't guess they do.
Okay.
However, they do have an orgy of a different sort. In my opinion, um, people sometimes I do presentations for medical doctors and others on mutilations, and they ask the big question. They ask questions that most of us out there don't have a consciousness to ask. What are they doing with the blood? What are they doing with the organs? Why those specific ones? And who's doing it? That
And
sort of thing. And
and
my
why
answer is
so many?
there's three different kinds of mutilations. But the bottom line is that I said one of the obvious things I said from my point of view and as an investigator is the alien needs he think of him as a tape recorder.
Hmm.
He's recording the pain, the agony, the screaming, everything of a mutilated person or animal. That's being recorded and it's going to be played back. You'd call it an orgy if you want, but it's being played back to someone who enjoys that sort of thing. And if you think the aliens come here to help us save the planet, fix the ozone hole, while they're mutilating our cattle and our people and are doing stuff like that, man, you know some aliens I don't know nothing about.
Yeah, right, right.
Right.
Okay, here's the last one I'm going to ask you because we're over time. Please tell us great facts about John E. Mack.
John Mack, he's a good man. I liked him very much. He was. I asked him. This was a real interesting question. I asked him. I said, "Where did you take your hypnotherapy training?" I often ask people that, and he said, "From non-professionals." I said, "Why did you do that with non-professionals?" He said, "Because they were better than the professionals." I laughed and I said, "That is actually true." And I said, "I'm glad you did that." I said, "But I'm surprised that you uh, don't seem to know the difference between screen dreams and screen memories." I said, he said, "Where in the world did you come up with that, Derel?" And I said, "It's in my book, John." I said, "If you read my book, all you had to do is go to alienhunter.org. If the books are there," I said, "all you had to do is read that. It's." I said, "I've been doing this for 50 years. I didn't get here yesterday. I don't throw out ideas because I think they're interesting. I actually think about them and actually test them as best I can. And if I have a pretty strong answer towards something, I say this is it. And if I am not sure or there's not evidence for it, I say I think this is possible, but I don't know yet. I can't prove it." So he liked the scientific approach. He liked the cop approach. He liked it very well. And I really liked John. Is a very, very good man. He will be greatly missed.
Very, very much. And it's so sad because they were trying to get him out of Harvard. And
That's true.
fortunately,
That's true.
other people have come to his defense.
Yes,
The lawyer's name is eluding me. Maybe you know the lawyer who also went to Harvard Law. He's he's um, he's gone to the Supreme Court on several different cases, not including, we're not talking about ETs here or anything like that. Again, the name is eluding me right now, and I'm sure after the show it'll come to me. The point is,
but probably. I know several attorneys, and the one you're thinking about is a friend of mine. Actually, he works with several big UFO folks. He's a good guy.
Daniel Sheehan! That's the one.
Yeah,
Yes,
there you
yes,
go.
yes. Well, with that being said, Derel, I want to thank you so much. This has been years in the making ever since I ran into you at an event, and after that we tried to make a day work out, and because of scheduling differences we couldn't do it. But now I finally got you on today, and the show is just as exciting as I hoped it would be, even more so. So I want to thank you so very, very much for doing this show. Let me give you a couple of shout outs again. The two super chatters, I want to thank again Justin T and Rockstar. Thank you, because if it wasn't for you folks, then I wouldn't be doing this. And all the people in the chat, thank you for being very interactive with our guest. And because if you guys aren't here, I wouldn't be doing this. And with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Sims and ask him for a final statement, along with Derel. If you could plug in where people can find you, and if you have any books to read them, anything like that. Floor is yours.
Certainly. The statement I'd like to make is that it's a metaphor, and basically, um, the map is not the territory. The menu is not the meal. You go to the restaurant, when you're looking at the menu, I guarantee it's not the meal. And some restaurants are so bad, the menu probably tastes better than the meal, but it's not the meal. It just isn't any good for you. Don't eat it. But the fact is, you can carry that a little further. Implants are not the territory. They're maps. The map is not the territory. Crop circles are not the territory. They're just maps. These things are maps. And the question, and it's a real problem with the alien, is he likes to not tell the truth. He likes to use subterfuge. So therefore, you have to try to figure out whether the maps are even correct or not, even though you have a map. That's number one. Number two is you can find me on alienhunter.org, and you can go there. You click on Alien Hunter, and it'll automatically email me, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you have. And if you have any interest in our video, or we have very little for sale because I just don't care about that. But I did write a couple of books at the insistence of my audience, and finally put together a video that's remarkable because it's got a picture of an alien in the back seat of a car in Los Angeles, abducting a guy. And guess who filmed it?
You.
Who took the photograph? The city of Los Angeles.
No.
And my abductee sent me the ticket, where they had the picture of you there, you owe the fine.
Yeah, yeah,
There's an alien sitting in the back seat. That's on the video. This is fantastic. Thank you, Los Angeles. I love you.
Well, I definitely would love to check that out. Derel, can you please hang on for a quick second to thank you off air?
Sure.
Everybody else out there, you know the name of the show, which is Dr. J Radio Live. Every single social media, from Patreon, Minds, Facebook, Instagram. Don't use Twitter right now because it's temporarily suspended, not banned, suspended. So it'll come back. Flickr, Tumblr, whatever you think of. The website, drjradiolive.com, which is drjradiolive.com. Everything is the same. And remember, folks, if you don't have a direct access to me, please don't email me. Contact Pam Vrettenberg. She runs my Facebook and other social media. She will get the messages to me. And with that being said, I want to thank everybody here for joining in tonight and being interactive. And of course, I want to thank my guest. And with that being said, me and Derel are officially signing off.